Hello and good morning, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the Pandemic Podcast. Hello again, guys. To those of you who don't know me, my name is Hannah Moloney. I'm 17 and I'm currently sitting in my room doing a podcast. It is May 2020, specifically Thursday the 21st of May. Thursday the 21st of May, and as I'm sure you're aware, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and I've had no school since the beginning of March, like every Irish student, basically. And yeah, so let's talk about that to begin with. So, obviously, COVID-19, massive issue. It was first obviously really bad in China in January and February, and then it came basically everywhere else over those 2 months. It was really bad in Italy during the ski season, which is obviously really bad for Italy and bad for anyone that was there. Never helps when it's during ski season. And now it is really, really bad in the UK. I don't think people realise that. It's really, really bad in the UK because they kept schools open 2 weeks longer than basically everywhere else did. And because I have family in the UK and I was talking to them and stuff, and I have cousins living in central London, and central London is doing okay at the moment. The infection rate has slowed down, but it's just before that it was pretty bad, and you could only go out of your house once to exercise once they brought the lockdown down, I suppose. Is that the word? I don't know. Because the infection rate was crazy and the NHS was overwhelmed, and the NHS is already a pretty decent system, kind of, so to be overwhelmed is pretty bad. They built a hospital in 10 days though, or was it 2 weeks? And my dad was involved in making City West not a hospital, really, but it was like for people that didn't need ICUs and needed oxygen support, you could go to City West. But that took them 3 or 4 weeks, and it was already a building. And it took the UK 14 days to make a whole hospital. So just to compare, put that into your heads. What was I going to... Oh, yes. So what I was going to say was Monday the 18th, which was 2 or 3 days ago, that was the day more restrictions were lifted in Ireland. So Ireland was doing pretty well. The HSE was kind of doing okay, because the HSE was pretty overwhelmed I think 2 months ago or a month and a half ago. It was pretty bad, but now it's doing okay. So you were able... There was garden centres being reopened. People in construction were back to work. So my dad is working this week, which he's enjoying. He's glad to be out of this house. And what was the main thing is that you were able to go out and see your friends. You're able to see your friends in groups of 4 while 2 meters apart, and you can't go to their houses. You have to see them out in parks, and you only should do that. You shouldn't do it every day. You shouldn't do it very often. And I think the advice is still stay in and only leave when you have to, and you can't go more than 5 kilometers from your house. But when I was taking my dog to the groomer on Monday, because the groomer was open, thank the Lord, I had to cut his hair, and he did not like it, and he didn't look very nice. Context, he's a poodle, so obviously his hair is pretty good. Well, it's not hair, it's fur. It was very curly, and he couldn't see very well, and probably was a bit warm. So we took him to the groomer, distance and everything. They sorted out the whole system. When I was walking back from the groomer in the afternoon, I saw, I'm not going to name them, people in my year and people in my school hanging out, which is fine, you're allowed to, but they were just walking on the path, like, side by side, and I was like, there's not even an inch between you. I didn't tell them this, I was across the road, but it really kind of upset me, because it's bad for everyone if the virus spreads. They took down they softened the measures. Is that the word? I don't even know what the correct terminology is. So people could see their friends, but they had to do it in a certain way. People aren't following it. And then I was looking at people's Snapchat stories and Instagram posts and things. People were hanging out in people's gardens, which you're not allowed to do. You have to stay. You're the advice is to stay in parks and stay distanced and still wash your hands regularly and everything. But I think the mindset of people is that the pandemic is over, and that's not the case. And I think they might have to, because you don't show symptoms for 2 weeks. So maybe in 2 weeks they'll see a rise in cases again, which is not what we want. That's not ideal, because they have a whole staged opening of the country, phased opening of the country, not staged, that sounds weird. And the phases are every 3 weeks. So the first phase started on Monday, which is when garden centres are open, people could see our friends, construction is open. But people aren't following, obviously it's not the law, like no one's forcing you to only see 4 friends at a time, or 3 friends at a time, but it's the advice and it's there for a reason. And obviously, no country is doing this perfectly, so we can't be like, oh, well, they're doing it wrong and they're doing it right. But no harm in following the advice of the government and health professionals, because it's just not fair on people, and we'll see the effects of it, and it'll affect how, because people are talking about whether we'll actually be able to go back to school in September, or how that distancing is going to work. So obviously that's not ideal, but that's just something I thought I would mention because it's something that I'm seeing a lot, and it's not. So if you're listening to this, only see 3 friends other than you, and distance. So to go on to what I was supposed to talk about, because as I said earlier, the coronavirus is especially bad in America, or the United States, whatever you want to call it. So the United States is now the worst affected country in the whole world. It has over 1 million cases. It hit 1 million cases, I think. Yeah, it was 1 million cases a few weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago. And I think it's about 100,000 deaths, or maybe 80,000. Need to research more. It is bad. That's what we have to take from this. It is very bad in America, because they didn't close down the country basically for a while, and now they're reopening again. Almost every state, apart from 2, are in the stages of reopening, even though all these health professionals are telling them that's not a good idea, and the health system, I say, as if there is one. There's kind of one, but there's not a universal one, is being overwhelmed, and it's not great, not ideal, and people are having strikes anyway. And the main issue in America is mass incarceration. So mass incarceration just means that there are way too many people in prison. To put that into context for you, America, the United States, holds 4% of the population of the world. So 4% of the people in the world live in America. That is 330 million people. And then America holds roughly 1/4 of the world's prisoners. 1/4 of the world's prisoners. That is crazy. Roughly 2.2 million people in America are in prison. What on earth? Like, that is intense and just unbelievable. And there are 6.9 million people in America on probation or parole. So that is roughly, well, that's including people that are in prison. So there's 6.9 people either in prison, on probation, or parole. So that's approximately 1 in 35 Americans that are in prison, on probation, or parole. What? That is so much more than any other country, and that is a 700% increase since 1970. It has increased by 7 times in the past, 50 years? That is incomprehensible. Is that a word? I don't know. That's irrelevant. It costs 100,000 per year per prisoner, so that is approximately 75 billion per year that the country is spending on prisoners. And the worst part of that is companies profit off it. Corporation Correction America made $1.6 billion in revenue in 2014. $1.6 billion in revenue in 2014. Companies are profiting off people being in prison. And to make matters worse than they already are, there is already unfortunately, a massive racial divide. So it is estimated that 1 in 3 African Americans will go to prison at some point in their lives or be arrested. Black men are 12 times more likely to go to prison on a drug offence. And obviously that is awful. But what makes it worse is that the estimated drug use between black men and white men, or black people and white people, is equal. Obviously you can't be sure, but they estimate that there's not a massive, there's not like there's more black people using legal drugs. It's roughly the same. And 12 times more black men go to prison on drug offence. So that is pretty awful, and 50% of people in prison have mental health issues that aren't looked after, and convicts in some states, once they leave prison, are ineligible to get student loans, social housing, or food stamps, and in some states you can't vote because this whole system in America. I saw this thing a few days ago saying America is just a third world country with a Gucci belt on it, and I was like, that is like, I can see where they're coming from. The whole idea that America seems like this dreamland, the American dream, and people want to go there, and then in some ways it's less developed than Ireland, because in Ireland we have a health system, even though it's not great. No matter how much money you have, you can still go and not have to worry about medical debt, because the most, what is it, I think the highest cause of bankruptcy in America is medical debt. So if you get cancer, you have to pay for it if you get better, or if you don't get better and you die, your family have to pay for it. So obviously not ideal, but that's besides the point. So America has a mass incarceration issue, as I said. And hang on, what was I going to say next? So, sorry guys, you've actually just reached the end of our time, because it has to be around 10 minutes. I think this will be maybe 13 minutes, so sorry Elaine. But just to say, obviously stay safe at this time, and stay in, don't see more than 3 friends at a time, or else I'll be very upset. And just I wanted to point out one other thing. So there is a group in America called the Dream Corps, and they have an initiative called #Cut50, and that is a call to reduce Americans' prison population by 50% over the next 10 years. So the website is called the Dream Corps. If you want to look into it, they have loads of information on it and things you can do, and that you can donate if you want. And that's something that, I mean, no harm in doing. Obviously there's lots of stuff going on, but that's something that maybe isn't being talked about as much as it should be because of what's happening. So maybe look into that if you have spare time, like all of us do. Yeah, stay safe and stay healthy, and I hope I will see, well, no, I can't. Hope I will see some of you soon in September. And yeah, thank you for listening.